And we're live. Hey, buddy.
Are we live?
We're live.
Are we live?
I've
got, by the way, I should tell you, I'm on my new, I got one of those desks that goes up and down.
Your standing desk?
It's so nerdy. It's great.
You feel super productive? Are you
yeah. I'm like, I feel like I could check you in at the airport right now. I feel like I'm like, everything's, I've got my lights set just right. Well, I'm not quite perfect because I can't quite get them perfect yet, but the table's amazing. And it's these two legs that work off of one button, and they're not that loud. Like you could make a pretty good levitation out of one of these legs.
The best makeshift magic prop that you ever bought. Huh?
Thank you, IKEA. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you.
It's lovely to see you, dear boy. Of course, I'm English, so I've got my tea in a cup. You're American, so you got your coffee in a Starbucks.
That's right. I got my coffee. That's right. Yeah. I wanted to. Really, I just wanted to make you feel not at home, I suppose. So be like, enjoy your brown water.
I'm in Canada. There's just more. There's more Tim Hortons than there are Starbucks. That's the problem.
That's true.
Yeah.
Tim Hortons is a cultural staple. It's good to see you too.
Yeah. So what are we going to do? What are we talking about? Let's.
So I wanted to talk about, a little bit about what it is that you've done in magic, sort of the stuff that maybe people don't already know about. Right. I got to meet you. I think you gave a lecture at MagicCon back in 2014.
That was the first time. So that was the beginning of the deep dive mentality, insanity that I started doing. So I just done Cloth, which was my 3-disc set on Card Through Hanky, and was a very I came up with a very visual way of doing it, and then decided, well, if you're going to carry a handkerchief around, then you should, and some gimmicks, you should be able to do some other things with the hanky. And then I started looking at all the other methods of Card Through Hanky and found some really interesting stuff. So for example, there's an amazing method where you put the deck in a glass, you cover it with a handkerchief, and the card rises through the hanky.
Really?
And it's Walter Gibson. I think it's Walter Gibson. I believe it's Walter Gibson's or Martin Gardner. And like, no one's ever seen it, and it's so easy, and there's no gaps and no gimmicks. And it's just like, this is amazing. So, I put that together. And then when we met, I was doing the Cards to Pocket, the very first Cards to Pocket lecture, right. Which I was trying to fit into, I think Dan and Dave were like 30 minutes only or something like that. And this was a 2-hour lecture. So I was like, plowing through it. But it was, that was the first one. And I've got that, and they filmed that for me. And I have that as part of my C2P collection. And then the longer, almost 2.5-hour lecture that I did at the castle is on there as well. But yeah, that was a great convention. Yeah,
I remember that was kind of the game changer, because they had a bunch of people that I didn't know about. They brought the Bell in, they brought in Woody Aragon, and I remember I was there, and it was the first time that I'd realized that you were a magician, because I was like, I know this face, I know I've seen this face, and then I went looking on IMDb. I was like, I knew it, I knew this guy, and then and you actually knew, what the hell you were talking about when it came to magic, which is, you see a lot of people, especially when they have like multiple passions, but usually like one passion supersedes the other. But you were like giving lectures and everything. I mean, this has been very much a thing for you. You've won awards as far as your magic is concerned, right?
I have. I've been very lucky to win, and of course everyone's, you can criticize awards and say it's a popularity contest, or it is, like the Oscars is like, what is the best film? Who is the best magician of the year? It's impossible really to vote that accurately, because you don't go in and see every show. But yeah, I did. I won Close Up twice, and I won Lecturer twice. And then my stage show, which was a 45-minute version of the show you saw, my one-man show, Life and Other Deceptions. I did that at the castle, and that got me the Stage Magician of the Year. And those were very, I was very touched to win that, and because that was in a bit of an emotional journey. Well, you saw the full length.
Version of that. I think I saw it 4 times total. Because
did you really?
Yeah, no, because the first time that I got out there, it was when I was releasing Vitreous, and Ryan Edwards and Patrick Kuhn were in town, and they're like, "Hey, Steve's got this show," and I was like, "Oh, I know Steve. I went to your C2P lecture when you did at Magic Live." And you let us sneak in the back, and we just sat in the back and everything. And I remember I like cried twice because it's a really beautiful show. But it was the long form. It was the one that you kind of had the run of the mill and everything. And
it was. I remember we had a conversation about your family afterwards because it touched on certain things. That was one of the most interesting aspects of doing a one-man show. I talked about this last night a little bit with a friend of mine, with some people, and I'm like, you know, a one-man show by its very nature is a narcissistic venture, right? It's me, and my life, and my journey, and you know, it's all that. It's a me, and especially that story, which was a Hollywood story in many ways. You know, I was concerned people wouldn't relate, but what I discovered was that the core of it was trying to be true to who you are, and your passions, and the power and the impact of family on your life, and the importance of a mentor, whether it be a family or a friend or a family, and all those themes which kind of came out from writing it. I discovered that people come up to me after the show and say, you know, something similar happened to me or my family member, or when I'm talking about when people don't let you in, when the gatekeepers are saying no, and they, you know, and all this kind of Hollywood crap that you have to deal with. I had a casting director who came and saw the show who said, I've been casting movies my whole life. No one will let me cast television because they think I can't cast a TV series. I had a guy come up to me who was like, my parents wanted me to be a doctor, and all I wanted to do was to be a musician, you know? And so they had a similar journey where they were an emergency room doctor saving lives, but really deep down inside, they wanted to join an orchestra. So everyone related to it in this very touching way. And, but that was a long journey. That show was a lot of work, 2.5 hours, 2 acts.
I remember because I came early days. I think it must have been like your first week,
right?
Because you were still letting people like me and sneaking in the back. And I remember after that, I was like, okay, I got to bring everyone that I know. So I brought my twin, and then I brought my wife. I met David Malick there. You know, just a whole slew of people. And I remember, you know, because you see a lot of shows and everything, and so much of it is about the magic. And for me, the best shows are the ones that the magic is almost incidental to the story, or it helps the story flourish.
Yeah.
But you're not so caught up in the trick that you lose the narrative.
The hard part is weaving the in and out of the weaving the magic into the show. And but the most frustrating part was the first 20 minutes of the show was like nonstop magic, because I wanted to have this moment where I stop and I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't do this. Right. I can't, I just, stop the show. I'm done. I can't do this. Right. And I wanted to have that super long, awkward pause where people are like, what's going on? Is he having a breakdown on stage? Like, he looks really pissed off. Something's gone wrong. And kind of make a left turn into the story and say, let me tell you why I'm doing this show. And it just kind of hit me as I was doing that piece. So I needed the first 20 minutes to be super fast, super funny. And so people are going, oh, we know what this show is going to be. It's, you know, it's a magic show. It's just a fun, fast magic show. And then they relax, and then you make a left turn into emotional land, and hopefully the guards are down. And you know, I feel like it's, I was just talking to Chris Philpott, who's an incredible guy and great friend of mine. And we were talking about Hollywood and magic and a lot of these kind of similar themes. And we were like, Hollywood is Lucy holding the ball, and actors are Charlie Brown trying to kick it. That's kind of what Hollywood is, and that's what showbiz is. In some ways, I think that's what life is. Always somebody else seems to be holding that ball, and then they just, you know,
just every once in a while pull it out.
Every once in a while, you know, and Linus is the guy who gets the goddamn part every time.
Yeah. He's always, why does he know so much? Like, how does he know all these things?
Yeah. So anyway, so I don't know kind of where I was on that, but the show was, so to find that in the end, to find a way of relating to people through this show, was really something I didn't expect. And it's a Hollywood story, but it's not a Hollywood story. It's a story of passion and belief, and the idea that you can be more than one thing.
Well, and family, like you talked about, I remember because you touched on a lot of things. I mean, you basically went over your entire history and sort of the weaving in. And I think one of the most important points that you made was the fact that you kind of fell out of love with magic, and then sort of mysteriously found your way back into it. And
well, it was more a case of having to make a Sophie's choice, because there was a moment in the 90s where I was working a lot at the castle, doing a lot of Beverly Hills private parties, and making really good money, going to auditions and having people say, but I saw you at the castle, I saw you at the bar mitzvah, I saw you performing card tricks, why are you here? And that moment of like, oh, I get it. I think people are more acceptable of multiple talents now. They almost expect it. But back then, God, it was hard. So there was a producer, Ray Stark, who actually said to me at dinner one night, it was like, you've got to make a decision. Who are you? And so that's when I was like, all right, I'm going to sell everything. I'm not a magician anymore. I need this to work. And then the strange thing was, life brings you back. I ended up doing a movie in New Zealand and bumping into an old mentor of mine from my hometown in England, which like, how the hell does this happen? And then these kind of confluence of events. And he had footage of my old mentor, Dick Turpin, when I was growing up, doing the cards to pocket, which was the trick he always wanted me to learn. And when I started watching that, I was like, I'm gonna learn this. And then I got into it again, and it was a slow build from all these different areas, but man, it was a crazy journey. And then when I'm doing the show and I'm talking about people from my past, I'm not kidding you, Jeremy. There's something about facing these things that we block, these doors that we close. Like when you open them, shit happens. It's eerie. Like I came to America on a cruise ship. I did 6 months on a cruise ship, and that's kind of what enabled me to be able to come, because of people I met and stuff. And the guy who booked me on that cruise ship was in the audience one night. And I'm like, I know you. I see, stop the show. I'm like, because also he was a bit of a shy step. I go, you, because he paid me crap money. And I remember, you booked me on the Carla Costa, right? He goes, yeah, I did. You got better. That's what he said. You got better. And then at the end of the show, so suddenly I'm like facing my demons, and all these doors are now opening that were closed before, and these people from my past are literally showing up. I got a call on Facebook. So at the end of the show, I talk about how, during the show, I talk about how there was a woman, an actress who was a friend of mine when I was a teenager, who said to me one day, you should go to America and knock on all the doors and show them how the British actors do it. She says, I can't, I got too many responsibilities. Basically, I was such a loser. I was so like, you could go.
Yeah.
And that put the bee in my bonnet, about going to the States and trying to break in as an actor. And so I always credited her in the show. I was like, this actress, she was the one, and I'm like, this is a good idea. Why not? I'll do it. I'll go. It's kind of what happened. I sold everything. And I get a Facebook message saying, hey, you're the Steve Valentine who used to live in Southend-on-Sea, right? And I was like, yeah. And she goes, if you remember me, Sue Devaney, we used to hang out a lot with Michelle and this other guy, Richard, Mark rather. And I'm like, remember you? I talk about you in my show.
You're literally in the dialogue.
Yeah, you're in. And she's like, well, I'm coming to the States to visit a friend of mine. Can we say hi? I said, more than that, come see the show. So there was a moment when I went out there and she's sitting in the back. And I was like, I got to introduce you to this person, because this is so bizarre. And that happened throughout the entire run. People I hadn't seen in years, or just those kind of strange connections. The universe works in strange ways, man.
True. I'm pretty sure every show there was something different. It was always sort of like in process and everything. So by the last show, like you really had it dialed in. And I remembered you had to take it to, I think it was the Black Rabbit Rose. Was that the one that you?
Yeah, we were taking it over to Black Rabbit Rose. Well, yes, which was kind of a very difficult journey. I would never work with nightclubs again, for many reasons. But it was an experience and a learning lesson. I took a 90-minute version of it to Black Rabbit Rose. That was a lesson in editing, really, because there was a lot to cut out.
I remember you and I having that conversation of like what you had to cut out. And I was like, no, you had to cut
much.
Out
Yeah, and there was just so much. And then when I did it at the castle, I cut it down to 45 minutes. I mean, it kind of helps you kind of get to the, I wonder about it now as an exercise when you're developing anything, an act or a show, if you just start to edit things down and say, what could I do without? What is the core of what this is about? And in the full length version of the show, we start with me as a kid, my dad passing away, and then me getting this job in Yugoslavia as a DJ and kind of entertainment director for a British nightclub for 2 years, getting drunk and hammered and performing 2 shows a night, anything I wanted. That experience leading up to the Bosnian War, where the war in Yugoslavia, where it all had to end and I had to get out. Right. Coming back, going on a cruise ship, meeting my ex, deciding to come to America, all by the time I was 19. By that time, I mean, I've been doing, I performed in the Falkland Islands, right after the war. I'd done all the army shows and cruise ships and stuff. I kind of left home around 17 to go to Butlins, which is a holiday camp, kind of a Catskills thing in England, where you're part of the entertainment team. It was all of that was in the show, if you remember. And then the thing about meeting the wife and getting the Russian and getting married and the wedding and and it wasn't, there was a lot of faults. I can look back and I go, okay, there's a lot I would change. Obviously, you always want to grow. And there was one routine that I couldn't in my mind, the idea is there. And I'm talking about when we did our vows, and my wife and we have 2 strips of paper, and I had everybody tearing a piece of paper on every vow. So by the end of it in the audience, as at the wedding, everybody had confetti, but it was confetti that was made from the vows. So each vow, so there's a romantic kind of thing as everyone tears the paper and then they throw the pieces up. But of course mine restores because I have a problem with commitment. This is the idea of it. But the purpose of that piece was to say that, this is the bit that we worked out. This is the bit my wife and I were going to do when we did our vows. But when it came to the wedding, I bottled it at the end and I was like, I don't want to do magic. I'm not a magician. I don't want to do this. And because she was very supportive. My wife is very supportive and, do the things you love. You love magic. You're great at it. You should be, don't let anything hold you back. Which is the reverse, I think, of a lot of people's experiences when it comes to magic. So that was the purpose of that routine, but I never quite got the timing right for the restoration, because you have this lovely moment where everybody blows their confetti in the air, and then they're kind of in that moment. So then when I go like this, blow the strip, and it comes out as a restored strip, there was almost an anticlimax, right? And I couldn't quite. So I would still want to go back to that one. That routine came out of the show, but I had a piece that I wanted to do. I wrote it because I wrote it as a script without worrying about how I was going to make it work. And then, you suddenly discover pocket management, and you can't banish a cage in the middle. You can't do this in the middle of something else because you've got this other things. Like when I started the show, I literally had a silk pull, another pull. I had a pull for the bird cage, which was up here. I had a fake chest for the chest piece. Right. I had all these things in my pockets. I had the other pull for the Tommy Wonder watch, ring, and wallet, which broke the opening night. I had I was literally like this.
You're walking out like a dove magician. Everything.
Yeah. I'm like, don't touch me. And then the great thing about that is as you start to divest yourself of all that, you start to relax. And by the time you get to halfway through, you're free. The jacket comes off and you're like, yeah, man, I just got a deck of cards. Here we go. Yeah. But Anyway, I'm rambling. Tell me. So
That's
continue.
okay. You're allowed to ramble. I noticed about you, even after I saw the show, right? You kicked off Magic on the Go.
Right.
And I remember because I saw your lecture at Magic Live. I think it was a C2P lecture.
Right.
And it was the first time that I had seen someone go into a routine where it wasn't, this is my routine. These are the light credits. And this is my take on it.
Right.
It was, I think they only gave you like an hour and a half and you had to do it 3 times or something like that. I remember because that schedule
was an hour. They gave me an hour and it was 2 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. So I go in there, I'm sitting in, front row because I had seen you before. And you gave this lecture, and I remember in an hour, it was one of the most impressive history lessons on sleight of hand with a deck of cards. I heard names that I knew, I heard names that I didn't, and they had that vault thing. They were going to toss that in there, and I remember downloading it afterwards, like looking up all of these things, and you talking about you're going to release this whole DVD project. And I get the DVD project, and you kind of neglected to mention that it's over 24 hours of content.
It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, you're gonna need some popcorn and maybe a Gatorade, and it was gonna.
Suck in.
Yeah. But I remember each DVD was like a different aspect of just this 10 card to pocket, which for anyone watching is legitimately the most difficult routine with a deck of cards. There's nowhere to hide. You can't go anywhere.
You're naked. Even Erdnase, and everyone loves to quote Erdnase, but Erdnase said it requires, I think it was a unflinching audacity or something like that. Unflinching audacity. Most people, most of the big guys, Nelson Downs, Fugard, all have quotes about how this is. And Henry Hay in Amateur Magician's Handbook, it's like, this is the mark of a magician. If you can get away with this, because it's just you and 10 cards, and the way the audience thinks it's done usually is the way that it's done, which is that you're palming them to your pocket. And magicians over the centuries have tried to come up with methods that didn't involve palming. So there's a whole section on C2B about the gaffed methods and the gimmicked methods and the jumbo card methods and the self-working, and then there's the impromptu methods. I think one whole disc on C2P is about palming of false counts. And palming from packets, which are kind of a different techniques.
It is.
Than palming from a deck.
Because I remember, I'd like to think I'm okay with a pack of cards.
You're all right. Yeah, a bit rusty every now and again.
Yeah, every once in a while I'll break them out. But I remember taking it down to 10 cards and realizing how much you have to relearn because you don't have the pack supporting whatever you're doing. It's 10 cards supports significantly less pressure than everything.
Yeah, but also so in practicing that and in working on and coming across these old moves, I also came up with new ones. And this is kind of what I discovered doing that was kind of selfishly was I was getting way more out of it myself, because in reading and researching, and you get inspired and you get ideas from other things. There's a great move by a guy called Nelson Lyford, and I saw it reinvented. Somebody did it as a download maybe a couple of years ago. They come up with, and I'm pretty sure it was a young kid. I'm pretty sure he didn't find it where I found it, but it was so interesting to see the move reinvented. But it was essentially, let me get a card here. I don't want to do this. All right. So essentially it is a way of showing your hand empty when you go to your pocket by your hand goes on your right on your butt, essentially. The finger here pushes the card against your butt and your hand kind of goes like this. I call it the golden move.
Was it Alex Hansford?
I don't remember, but essentially there's you go like this, and then you come back, grab the cards and go into the pocket. And it's the beautiful move. And it was originally, and it's, of course someone's going to reinvent it, because it's, if you work with a deck of cards, eventually you're going to discover that. And I think his technique was slightly different. Like the card was maybe lengthwise and went into the back pocket at some point. But Lyford's move was in the Magic Wand in the 1920s. That move. And it's one of the greatest card to pocket moves, because when you're guilty, when you're going to your pocket and you've got cards palmed, it will be great to flash the palm casually right before you go into the pocket. And that move enables you to do that, right? And that was just like one of the things that I discovered. And so that inspired all these other methods. And so there's a whole sections on gimmicks and sleight of hand methods for that trick that I created because I'd soaked up so much along the way.
Yeah, you would steep yourself in. That was the other thing is like, okay, so most of the time when you're doing this, right, you get maybe 3 sections. The history of how someone created the routine, right? The sleights that are going to be used in the routine, and then this is how you do the routine using the sleights. But you had interviews, you had history, you talked about your mentor, you know, you had, who's that? You had what, Cy Enfield, Dick Turpin, I feel like was in that
Dick
one.
Turpin was my mentor when I was a kid. Yeah, he was an old street performer, and you know, one of the saddest. Yeah, but yes, I had live performances, TV performances. Paul Daniels sent me his performance of Cards to Pocket.
Who's the other one that was like doing it on TV?
I
want to say it was Derek Dingle.
No, I taught Derek. I talked to Richard Kaufman. He let me teach that.
Okay.
But there was footage of Marlowe doing it, and we couldn't figure out who took the footage, like who it belonged to. So we were just like, well, this is too good and too important not to record it. I forget where it came from. Somebody was like, have you seen this? And we're like, who does it belong to? And nobody knew, you know. And so you get to see all these masters performing it, which I think was also super useful. And then I put on in the performance segment, when I actually started doing it again, or when I'm doing it for the first time, really, I'd created a routine. I wasn't doing Dick Turpin's routine. I'd learned his routine, and then I learned the Cy Enfield routine. And then I made some changes, and I started doing it in the close-up room as an encore. And so I've got early performances in the close-up room, and then how the routine developed to being what I used to close the show, you know. But it's a really great trick. I came up with the idea of using business cards at a business function. You know, I didn't have a deck of cards, and I was like, how many of you got business cards? Really? Still? Okay. Then just go around and grab 10 cards. And the great thing with business cards is, first of all, it's personal. So you can go, all right, you can miscall a name, right? And go, okay, who's Derek? Okay, I'm going to get you in my pocket, Derek. We'll do some business. Here we go, right? And you're in the pocket. But also when people hold up business cards and they're taking them out of the wallet, they're sometimes in a little bunch. And if you can, you say, I'll just take one, and you take 2.
Nice.
Right? So you know you've got instant duplicates. So you can kind of jazz a routine from doing all this. And palming is so much easier when you have small little business cards.
Yeah, right. Yeah, everyone is Jason England at that point. You're done.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
But
so when you did this, how long was that project? I mean, how long did it take from beginning to end, from when you said, I think I want to release this, I think I want to create a project that gives it its due? How long did that take before it was like on a DVD and out to the world?
I want to say it was 2.5, 3 years altogether.
Okay.
And at one point, the wife, who was my camera person the entire time, was like, that'll do, pig. She's like, I think you've got enough. And when you watch it, like, and this is the thing about Magic on the Go altogether, because it is that, you know, my weight goes up and down, my hair goes long and short because it took so long to film it. Like, I'm stubbly, I've got a beard, I'm clean shaven, I look exhausted, I look fresh and yogurt up. It's just like,
but the clothing never changes. It just looks like you're morphing.
Just the face morphs every time I go. And it's really a whole life on there. It's a whole life on there. Now I'm doing the same thing with the egg bag. I'm filming the egg bag. I've been doing it for the last year and starting to put the stuff up on Magic on the Go now. And same situation where I'm finding things that are amazing that I've never heard about, tracking down routines that everyone talked about in the 50s, but no one has, and coming up with new stuff myself. So it's that journey has been similarly fantastic, and discovering little great bits of history. Like, I had this idea that it would be really fun to, and I'll tip this now, to take a small drink in the news gimmick, which you can get from Prop Dog, and put it in an egg bag, right? put it in the
Ah,
secret compartment of an egg bag because they're quite soft and they don't make noise. And if you turn the egg bag inside out, now you can use the gimmick. So if you want to do like a shot glass production or a larger glass, and you can pour liquid into the egg bag or pour liquid out of the egg bag. So I think, all right, this is interesting, an idea, or switch the bag. So I start looking up, has anyone poured liquid out of an egg bag? And sure enough, there's a guy called Dougie Francis, who I talked about before on C2P, who did a bathroom act where he used a toiletry bag and a bar of soap as his egg bag routine. And at the end, the back of his chair, he's got a duplicate bag that's filled with liquid, and he switches the bag, and then he pours water into a jug and brushes his teeth at the end of into a bowl and brushes his teeth at the end of the thing. This was described in the Gen magazine. And I'm reading this and I'm like, God, nothing's new, right? This is so annoying. But he's used a switch of a bag. And then I'm researching a little bit more, and I discover that the first time the drink in the news gimmick came out was a trick called Late Night Extra, which was invented by Douglas Francis, the same guy. And it was sold by Harry Stanley back in the 50s, and that was Late Night Extra. And
so he had a thing. This was a thing for him. This was,
yeah.
Huh.
So I don't think I got the impression he just had a bag full of liquid. I don't think he used the drink in the news gimmick. I think he had maybe a plastic bag in an egg bag and just filled it up, and so he could, but it was just weird that coming full circle to the idea of putting a drink in the news gimmick in an egg bag, and a drink in the news gimmick was invented by Douglas Francis. It's like it's kind of cool. You find these connections, that are kind of exciting.
Which I love. That you already know where I sort of stand with that stuff. Like I just love watching the trace of ideas and how often it leads back to the place you started. And again, I can't get enough.
Happens so much.
And
the more you investigate, the more you research stuff, you'll find these things. They'll make themselves known to you.
So that brings me to a question I've been meaning to ask you. People who are watching this, in a lot of instances, they may only be getting downloads, or they're buying, a book a year, or maybe 2 or 3 books a year. But like when you deep dive, you spent years doing the research, pulling footage, reading old magazine articles and everything. If someone really, really wanted to dive deep into something that they were interested in, what would you recommend? Like, obviously, start with what you know. What next?
No, we live in a great world now where a lot of great magic books, and especially magazines, have all been digitized, and we can buy them in PDF. And so we have the ability now to PDF search the Sphinx or the Magic Wand or the Gen. And so then this opens up so much available to us when it comes to research. We also have Ask Alexander, which continues to be one of the greatest resources for me when I'm doing research. And just from those alone, when you start to kind of look into something, and what will happen is, as you deep dive and you're looking at stuff, and there's a routine here, you'll also notice all these other things that also will just kind of sink into your mind and into your memory banks about tricks or comments about magicians. And later on, you'll go, oh, I know that. And they'll be like, how do you know that? Like, I don't know, but I know that because it was next to the article. Yeah, exactly. It's peripheral. You pick up all this stuff peripherally, which is how I got into the egg bag to begin with, because I kept reading reviews of different people doing the egg bag, including this guy Cecil Keach, who was an old English performer, Australian performer, who worked in England for years in the music halls. And so suddenly I'm reading all this stuff, and then I read about Albini, who was the guy who the egg bag's been around for a long time, but Albini was the one who really shrunk it down and created the challenge presentation that everyone loves now, right? That was Albini. And a lot of people didn't like him. He was a very aggressive person. I think if he was alive now, I think we would say he was more like a shock insult comic doing magic. It just was, you know, and people
like an Andrew Dice Clay, but with magic.
Yeah, like an Andrew Dice Clay, or yeah, exactly. And so magicians didn't like him, and they didn't like his claims, but he taught his routine to Arnold the Bear, Horace Golden, who became famous for their egg bag routines. He created his own version of the egg bag. And when he died, he was so hated. And I found this one quote. This is what got me. It said, I'll paraphrase it, but it basically said, Albini, the so-called, this is in the Sphinx, it said, Albini has died, the so-called inventor of the egg bag. Let us bury his faults with him and forget them.
Wow.
That was the only obituary he got in the Sphinx.
That's a little rough. Yeah. When they broke his wand, it was with gusto. They're like, ugh. Yeah, he's down. Yeah,
it's already broken. So, you know, that stuck in my mind, right? You know, and so later on when I'm researching the Albini routine and the Golden routine, that kind of gave it emotional context. So, and that's what I love about it. You know, there are lives involved in magic. There is history, world history. Just look at the magic wand. That magazine goes through 2 world wars and a Russian revolution. And it's you can see the history in the magazine as you read it every month, right? Because the types of magic people are doing change when they can't travel with large props anymore, or they can't get the metal or the silks or the eggs because of rationing, or there's one time where the editor is writing from another office because his office got bombed in the Blitz, right? So people are living it, and then you see like the patriotism come in with the magic that is, you know, screw Hitler, and you know,
all England, flags and right.
Yeah, and all the flags and the Union Jack magic and all of that stuff. And so history is embedded in magic, which makes it even more fascinating to me.
That makes sense. I've been fascinated by the human aspect of the stories. Like, you know, so much of it can get caught up in the what did you do, and then you find out the who they were, and it adds so much more context to what they were doing at the time.
Yeah,
why they were, like you said, why they were doing that, what outside influences, you know, caused them to go down certain roads and everything. Okay, all right. So then let's jump into the fact, you know, not everyone has the time to do the level of research that you're doing and everything. So you kick off Magic on the Go. And this is one of the things I wanted to talk about with you is, I mean, how many videos are you up to now?
I think we're up to about 600.
Okay. All right. So just
think.
Okay. So no big deal.
Yeah, we have 600. It's pretty crazy now. You can look up almost any topic from silk magic to suspensions to some book tests to I've got all my stuff on there. So C2P is on there, cloth is on there, booked. My book test is on there. My 3-card Monty, creatively called 3, that's on there. And then I did this whole thing on diminishing cards. It was like 25 methods of diminishing cards, because that's a plot that fascinated me, and tracked down all these old cards. And, so yeah, and the reason I did that in the end was frustration with the world of the DVD, like the idea that the waste and the time it took and the cost of getting these things printed up and forever having them returned because the DVD manufacturer put a bunch out that were blank. I mean, it just, all these issues. And I thought, and I love the idea of having a more immediate way to share the knowledge. And so a lot of it is the stuff that, you wouldn't necessarily put out as a single trick, but I think it's important information. So that's all on Magic on the Go now. Like there's one, for example, I just edited a video. It's a 3-minute thing for the egg bag where I talk about this guy, Dr. E.G. Irvin, who was in the 50s, a really creative, unusual thinker. And he had this idea with the egg bag where he put like a little slit in the top right-hand corner on the outside of the egg bag, just underneath the binding. And so what that enabled you to do was all your egg bag moves, but you could steal the egg out the top of the bag. You could just squeeze it through the slit into your hand. And so it kind of opens up these, you can drop the egg in, you can show the bag empty, your hands are empty, they can reach inside, there's nothing in your hands. You put the bag over here, now you've got the egg and you can reproduce it without having, so it opens up ideas, right?
Yeah.
So I just finished editing that. So yeah, there's I've got listed over 200 items for Egg Bag. I don't know I'm going to get through all of them, but I'm going to
Goodness.
try.
Okay. All right. If someone wanted to deep dive, this is one of the things that, you and I had this conversation when you first
Yeah.
kicked off Magic on the Go, which was it would enable people to, yes, there's breadth there, but more importantly, there's depth.
Yeah.
You could sit there and fiddle around and go, a millimeter in a million different directions, or you could go a kilometer straight down into something, history, all of the people, the influences. You have
Yeah.
interviews, right? I remember CTP, you were pulling in a lot of people. Newell,
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah. Noel was great. Yeah.
So if someone was getting started and, like I said, they don't have the time to maybe do the research and everything, but they find your resource and everything, where would you suggest that they start? Because like you said, there isn't the same level of indexing and everything, but they've come to your platform. What
Well,
would
you can search.
you got to
You
give
just
them a
search.
tour?
Yeah, you just search the platform. So you do cards. If you just put in cards, and all the card stuff will come up, or you can put in cards across, and there'll be like 20 methods of cards across. Or you can. The great thing about the platform is the searchability, which is what I wanted. I wanted it to be an online, like a huge online database of magic. So, and I've used it myself in this way where I was like, what is that routine? Oh, what is that routine? And I'll look it up on my phone. I'll put in the prop of spoon and glass. Oh, right. Okay. Now teach myself real quickly. I'll watch the video of me doing it to remind myself of the routine. So the searchability is what's great, right? So you could, and then in searching the trick, you may find yourself going into some other directions and learning some different things. And because you'll see all these things that are around, or maybe these different methods that you didn't think about, or the history or the recommendations. When I teach a trick, it's not always just the trick. It's often, like you said, the history, but also what can we do with this now? What are the variations on this?
That's what
here's an idea.
Every time that I ever got something from you, there are so many variations that you could tell you just sat there and hammered out and followed your curiosity on just these small things. And I feel like you gave, like on the platform, you're giving people the same opportunity to just sort of follow their curiosity to wherever it takes them.
Exactly. And here's what is really interesting thing is, often ideas come to you, and I'm sure you find this, that when you're filming, when you're teaching, some of your best ideas come at that moment because you're using a different section of your brain. First thing you're doing is you're having to compartmentalize the information in order to teach it. So you really have to understand it, which helps you learn it in a different way. And then secondly, the subconscious goes, yeah, but what about this? So quite often I'll be teaching a routine and I'll go, alternatively, you could do this. And that literally happened while I was filming. And which is really exciting. So there are times when I've been filming and I've come up with better methods. So I finish that and I'm like, I'm going to film this new method that just came to me. Of course, what if I just do this? Why didn't I think about this before? But because you don't put the pressure on yourself to create, you're putting pressure on yourself to teach. It somehow frees the subconscious. I wanted to tell you that there was a series of articles in Abracadabra, the old magic weekly from England, by a guy called Jack Potter, which was invaluable to me. It was called Potter's Bar. And it's all very accessible on Ask Alexander, or if you can search for it. But he did all this amazing indexing of magic via effect. So when I was doing card to pocket, when I was doing card through handkerchief, the first thing I checked was Potter's Bar. Okay. And he's done it for you. It goes up to, I think, the 70s. Okay. So, it told me that there was a routine by Fred Colpett in the Magic Wand for cards to pocket that I didn't even know existed. So I searched through the Magic Wand. I found it. It was way ahead of its time. It was one of the best routines out there. And then I added the idea of doing it with signed cards for using the Fred Colpett sequence. So Potter's Bar is great. I would say, ask yourself what it is you want to learn. You can there's two ways you can look at magic, right? You got to learn for your act, what you want to perform. And then there's also just learning, watching, immersing yourself in magic for the sheer joy of the craft, of what it is. And I realized that when I was doing Magic on the Go, because I thought it can't just be tricks, because we only have a certain amount of time. right? And our performances are only a certain length, and how many tricks can you learn? And so it's not just tricks on there. So I have talks on subjects, and I call it, there's past masters, where I read the words of past magicians that have been in print, which are strangely applicable today as they were maybe written 100 years ago.
Right.
There's I just did one on Horace Golden's search, my search for the Horace Golden egg bag routine, which has not been described properly, and kind of piecing together from all these different things. So that was one talk. I did a talk on the vanishing birdcage. Carl Hertz, when he was challenged to perform the vanishing birdcage at the Houses of Parliament in England and prove he didn't kill the bird, because he was accused of killing the bird every time. Right. And how Will Goldston was behind it. So I do these investigations, into the world of magic. Favorite magicians of mine, like Paul Rossini, who I read about, is one of those guys who I always wish I'd met and got a chance to see.
That's awesome. If you had the chance, it's you and 4 other people at the table who, long since gone, but you'd get the chance to finally clear some stuff up. Just out of curiosity, who are the other 4 people at the table for you?
Magician wise, you're talking about? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I would say Paul Rossini for sure. Absolutely Paul Rossini. Billy O'Connor, who was known as, I have a whole thing on him in Magic on the Go. He was known, Billy O'Connor and his 52 assistants was the name of his act. And it was just him and a deck of cards. And he traveled the world doing an 18-minute card act. That was all he did. And he was very successful. And I pieced together most of his act, and it's on Magic on the Go, including a blindfold card read where he's blindfolded and he's taking the shuffle deck and he's just pulling off the front cards and naming them. Billy O'Connor, because he would entertain in 2,000-seat venues with a deck of cards, and I think that fascinates me. So people who did that, like Nate Leipzig, there was a guy called Tom Fagan who was kind of a Leipzig Billy O'Connor clone, right? Kind of that kind of guy. And I like these guys because they're performers. O'Connor was a guy who created a lot of magic, but never changed his act. Never, he came up with the idea of PK touches long before PK touches even existed. He suggested once to Harry Stanley an act where you touch someone and somebody else feels it. Wouldn't that be great? How would you do that?
Everyone's thinking that one happened just not but 4 years ago. Like that's
right. Yeah. It's like that move. It's like the move. It's like, it's going to come around. Right. So let me think. So that's, and I think Harry Keller. Okay. I read his autobiography, which is a travel log. It's really interesting because it's not really about the magic. It's about his travels around the world in the 1800s, and it's beautiful. And I'm thinking of doing something with it.
Okay.
Script wise, because it's a tour of the world in the 1800s, told through the eyes of this guy who was an adventurer, and he's clearly searching for something, and it's not clear. The book is written from the point of view of the little devil on his shoulder in the posters. So that little devil is telling the story of Keller's travels, which is great because he's then able to say how great he is without it sounding conceited, because the little devil, the little junior helper or junior devil, I think is the person. But he talks about, going to Japan and China and meeting these interesting characters along the way, and ships sinking with all of his belongings on it, or being attacked by bandidos in Mexico. And the thing about Keller that I loved was he would go to a country and he would fight with his 2 assistants. It wasn't a big illusion show at the time, and it wasn't big until he got back to the States. But he would go to a town and he'd find a theater. Nothing was booked ahead of time. He'd find a theater, book it for a week or 2 weeks or whatever, give himself a week to do press, get the posters printed. If they hadn't been sent to him, he'd get some posters printed. He would do this kind of hardcore advertising where he would write these letters to the press as different people saying like, I can't believe that we're allowing this man who claims to have spiritualistic powers, do his show. I challenge you to come to the theater and tie me up. He would create this interest.
He's like growth hacking his own show. That's okay.
Exactly. It was amazing. And if you read about exactly how he did all this, it's super impressive. So I think he's a guy I could sit and talk to for days, weeks, out, months.
The only reason I asked that is because now I'm gonna go hunting for all those people. But I want to know, like, who are those people that still have like open questions in your brain of like, hey, can we work this out for just a hot second? Can we just
and this guy Keach I find fascinating. I've been kind of Cecil Keach, who in the early 1900s toured with Levant in Australia, and he was his comedy compere magician. He did half the show, and one of the things he did a spirit cabinet that was out in the open as opposed to being closed. And apparently, from all the reviews I read, it was hilarious and fantastic. And we have no record of what that routine was. It took me 18 months to track down his egg bag, which is really cute and really fast and funny and a great opener. And he came up with some very interesting material that most of it was published through Harry Stanley, Unique Magic in England in the 50s and 60s, when Keach was an old man. And for example, he's got a thing called the Elusive Pimpernel, which I've just managed to track down a set that Abbott's made in the 50s. And it's 3 plastic tubes, and you can see right through them. But imagine doing a cups and balls with 3 tubes instead of 3 cups. But he does it as one large red ball goes under one of the tubes, and you can mix them up, and it can be under any of the cups at any time. And he's got this very simple setup where you put the tube over a ball and it can lift it, or it can release it like a chop cup, but without magnets. And you can see right through it's such a simple gimmick. And it's fantastic. And I would love to have seen him do his, where it is, nobody knows, round and round and round it goes kind of sequence to get an idea of how he presented it. So he's a fascinating character. I love the old pros that used to did thousands and thousands of shows. Those are the guys I want to talk to.
Well, like you said, the guys who could like pack small and play huge. Like I was always fascinated by those stories. Like the guys who, because I don't know what they're doing, but things are different now where I don't feel capable of doing that. And you watch, you read these stories of, like you said, entire opera houses packed, and this person's got like an old school deck of cards
and that's it. And I think the big secret, and you read about Leipzig and O'Connor, and the 2 things that they had in common was they would have a table with 4 chairs on stage. And so they'd have a committee, 4 people. But I think this is what Blaine tapped into in his own way, was the magic sells better through the reactions of the people on stage. So it's their reactions that are selling the trick to the thousands of people, not necessarily the actual trick. Right.
Yeah. Right.
I think, but you read about Leipzig doing a series of color changes, literally freaking color changes on a vaudeville stage in a spotlight. And that was a feature. I want to see how that played. I want to see how he did that.
Yeah. Honestly, now that you bring that up, now I want to find that. Okay. Yeah. All right. So just to sort of wrap everything up, we've talked about your platform, which it's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk with you. I think it's one of the best tools if you wanted to just chase your curiosity. But what was it that sort of kept you going, hunting it down and everything? Like you said, it took you 3 years to do C2P. All these other projects, you and I have talked with them, over the course of years, and they're still in process because you're still finding things. What is it that you would recommend to people if they want to really go deeper, dive deeper? How do they do that?
I think that you have, the first thing you have to do is remove any time constraint. And this just needs to be something that you do on an ongoing basis for fun. Like I usually do it late at night. Everyone else has gone to bed and I'm on the computer and I start diving. And, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. But I think there's it's tricky because everyone has a different reason for looking at magic. But I would say, do you love magic? If you love magic, then you should know as much about it as you can, because you should soak up the world. All these people that have come before, whose shoulders we stand on, who were doing thousands of shows, we can learn from because they've already done so much, as opposed to not just about the move. And the magic is interesting, but the story behind the magic, the people behind the magic, that's what keeps me interested. And how they approached the approach and the point of view. So this is what I think is the key, is like, what are you trying to say? What's your point of view, right? So, Alan Jackson said, an old English magician, who once said that the best way to figure out a routine for yourself is to learn all the routines that are out there, let that sift through your brain, take the best of each thing, and then kind of mold and add your own and create your own routine. And I think that's the best way to do it. But what's your point of view? Why are you learning this? Why do you want to learn this magic, right? Do you want to just time travel and go back in time and read the history of magic and realize that it's no different than it is now, with people stealing people's tricks and like
people
he's doing my
publishing
routine
secrets to get back at them, like
yeah, exactly, publishing somebody's act, or you've got to find what's your reason. What's the reason that you want to do this? So is it to learn a routine for your show? Is it because the topic fascinates you? You got to find your point of view. For me, for Cards to Pocket, I was on the hunt I wanted to figure out why magicians stopped doing the trick, because it was super popular. And then in about the 70s or 80s, like, you can find very little on it. Very few people, and very rarely do you see it performed today. So
yeah, I feel like it transitioned to like Cards Across.
Card handling changed, right? So card handling became what we think of as clean handling, with biddle grips and all this kind of stuff. But it isn't really, because I think it looks suspicious.
Yeah.
It looks like you're handling a deck of cards, as opposed to I've just got holding a deck of cards. Rossini always held a deck up like this, right? When he was doing his magic, it was like, I'm not doing anything with it. It wasn't like, I'm going to do my move and then I'm going to go like this. Right. And that once I've done my move, now I can show him it. He was just always just kind of like this. I'm not doing anything with the deck, and yet the magic is happening. So I find that fascinating. But again, I tend to go off on a tangent.
That's
but I feel like
you're allowed to. Yeah, no, go for it.
I just, I in the end, what is your reason? And follow that emotional journey into it. Did you want to do it for an act? Did you want to do it for just because you want to know? There's the production of a bowl of water from underneath a cloth, which was done by Herman the Great and so many back in the day, and you never see it done today at all. And Herman would do it. He would produce 2 large bowls of water, and then go into the audience and do it surrounded with his wrists held, the big cloth, and he would pull out a big bowl of goldfish, right? Doesn't that sound like a trick you want to do?
Yeah.
And these were sophisticated audiences where they saw all these magic shows coming through town all the time. There's an article in the Magic Wand written by a Scottish guy about all the performers that are coming through Edinburgh and or Glasgow. And he says things like, oh, it's a quiet week for magic this week. We've only got Horace Golden, Arnold de Beer, and Dante.
Oh, shucks.
And you're like, you're fucking spoiled.
Yeah. Cry me a river.
That's a quiet week for magic. So you have very sophisticated audiences. So your magic had to be right on. So so now I want to study the water bowl, right? I want to figure out how to do that. And then you kind of, oh, well, there's this great routine by Charles Waller. You've probably never heard of Charles Waller. Charles Waller was an Australian magician who wrote 5 or 6 books that are some of the most original magic you'll ever read. No one's ever read. No, you can get them. They're digitized on Conjuring Arts. But he's got a whole bowl routine where he's got a cloth and he produces a bowl of flowers, and then he produces produces some flowers for his assistant on the left. He produces a bowl of water and goldfish for the person on the right, and then a bottle of beer for himself. And the presentation is great because the bottle of beer is this funny climax to this great opening routine.
To like this amazing vaudevillian level.
Yeah. And he's like, we've got, flowers for the lady, and here's the fish course. And for me, bottle of beer. Good evening. How are you? And what a great presentation, right? So you find these things and you get this little tickle of excitement. It's like when you order a magic trick and it arrives in the mail and you've got the box and you're doing the opening. Imagine that happening all the time when you research magic.
That's so cool. Okay, not bad. Steve, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time. Thank you for
my pleasure
for sharing your thoughts and everything. Again, Magic on the Go, as far as I'm concerned, it's one of the best resources that anyone could have. So thank you for all the work that you put into that.
And back at you, man. I love what you're doing on YouTube. Keep it up.
Thank you so much. So anyway, I'll put a link in the description for everyone, so that way they can find your work. And thank you.
My pleasure. Take it easy.
Take care.
Bye.